Welcome back to the Education Conference Committee. We are ready to move adoption of the articles that we spoke of earlier this afternoon. Let's make sure we have enough of our members in place. Yes, yes, all right. And so with that, members, I would move that we adopt House Article 2, Section 8, as amended by the A53 amendment, and Senate Article 3, Section 4. Chair Youakim.
Madam Chair, thank you. I was wondering on R8, A3, Article 3, page 8. Let me get to the right thing here. On lines 63.14, if you would accept that oral amendment to have reinstate the scientifically based language and have or evidence-based. As you said, you might accept that as a friendly amendment.
Chair Youakim, yes, actually scientific-based is even a higher standard. And so we will accept that as an amendment, a friendly amendment to the proposal before us. Any further discussion? Chair Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to just understand, and I maybe should have asked this when this was before us the other day. I know that the phrase comprehensive scientifically based reading instruction has a definition in statute, and I'm just wondering what the Senate's goal was in including evidence-based and structured as opposed to balanced, kind of just what the thinking was with that.
Thank you, Chair Pinto. We had a significant discussion in the Senate regarding that, and a structured reading instruction program is very structured and contains 7, I believe, different elements. I'm wondering if I could ask Ms. Hagedorn, Jan Hagedorn with the Reading Center. I'm so glad you're in the chamber. If you could come up to the table and speak a little bit more to this about the importance of the exact words we have here structured. Ms. Hagedorn, welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself for the record, a little bit about what you do, and we'd like to hear a little bit about the importance of structured reading instruction and evidence-based reading instruction. Ms. Hagedorn.
Well, thank you for giving me the chance to do this. My name is Jan Hagedorn. I'm the Reading Readiness Director at the Rochester Reading Center. We teach kids that are dyslexic. That's our purpose. And kids that are dyslexic must be taught with structured reading. Systematic, structured reading. Balanced literacy does not work for them. The difference is with the structured explicit instruction, students that do not learn intuitively about how the language works are able to learn the language. Let's see, how can I say this? There is a code for how English works. And for kids that are struggling readers, they do not intuitively learn that code. So with explicit structured instruction, they get it step by step, feeding them the information so they can learn it on a very foundational level for phonemic awareness. And then with each step, we build more skills. So that is a real difference between balanced literacy and structured literacy.
Madam.
Chair Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Hagedorn. I understand you to be describing structured programs as being necessary for children struggling with dyslexia. Is there also an advantage to them, or is it always better for all
it's absolutely, I'm sorry. I don't know how this works. It absolutely works for all readers. In fact, research shows that if you use the structured literacy program, students that are excelling actually become better spellers, which then makes them better writers. So it's the idea of, rather than having children have to figure it out on their own, we give them the tools so they can take what we know is true for our language code and then grow with it. So we teach phonemes, we teach how to blend those phonemes together. Then we teach them how the structure of the language works for morphemes, so they can learn how to manipulate the language and what the meanings are. So it's a very explicit instruction.
Madam
Chair Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it sounds like, Ms. Hagedorn, like you're saying that, so it sounds like we're replacing, by replacing the word balance with the word structured, we're sort of choosing a better, there's a better form of reading instruction by having it be structured rather than balanced.
In the research, I'm sorry, in the research for reading, there is no question that structured literacy will get more children reading than balanced literacy. Because
Chair Pinto, and I do want to just remind the conferees, as we spoke of earlier, that this is a requirement. It is not an exclusive requirement. So we do want to make sure that that there's an understanding there, that we're not reading more into this than the language actually states.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Pinto.
Thank you. So if I'm understanding you right, I just want to make sure I understand about the requirement that the teacher programs, I guess, have to instruct students in those programs as to how to do structured reading instruction programs, but they could choose to do others as well. Is that what the chair is referencing? I just want to make sure I understand your comment, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair Pinto. I believe that this is a requirement that they receive instruction in scientifically based, evidence-based, and a structured reading program. There are other instruction elements as well, but we must, at a very minimum, make sure that every teacher that is prepared in the state of Minnesota, that goes into our classrooms and works with our children, teaching them to read, understands structurally evidence-based reading program. I think it is almost malfeasance if we send teachers out into the classroom who do not have this type of preparation. Doesn't mean there aren't other things that exist, but if we want to change the dynamic, if we want to change the dial on literacy, we must make sure our teachers have this preparation.
And Madam Chair, just one final follow-up.
Chair Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then the addition of evidence-based as an option for either that or scientifically based, or in the original language with evidence-based, what is the benefit, either Ms. Hagedorn or perhaps you, Madam Chair, in that evidence-based as being a possibility rather than scientific-based? Just to understand the distinction between the two.
Thank you, Chair Pinto. We did describe that a little bit earlier in that ESSA talks about evidence-based structure, evidence-based teaching, and scientifically based is actually of a higher standard, which has been peer-reviewed by scientific journals, and we don't necessarily have that as much. But if Ms. Hagedorn has more to add, please go right ahead.
well,
Ms. Hagedorn.
yes, thank you for asking. The very gold standard is scientifically based because they're using control models. And in evidence-based models, they often don't have controls, but they can make some assumptions based with good research techniques. So I think the difference between just having research and using evidence-based research is saying that you actually are using some standards of how you apply the information so that you're truly testing it rather than just making a graph to make it look good.
Madam Chair, just maybe one final
Chair
thing.
Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to comment that in the way that's described, I think in the Health and Human Services world, I would think of what you're describing as scientifically based as they would use the phrase evidence-based, and then they would use the phrase evidence-informed for what's being referred to evidence-based here. I might be wrong, so somebody afterwards can come up. But Madam Chair, thank you, and thank you, Ms. Hagedorn.
And so, Chair Pinto, we have it all covered here with this oral amendment. Thank you very much.
Right.
Chair Davnie.
Madam Chair, so just to clarify, are you incorporating the Youakim oral amendment? Or
Yes.
do we need, okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So, any further discussion?
yes,
Chair Pinto. Well, actually, we've amended the, I think Chair Youakim offered an amendment to the amendment. So, the A53 amendment, do we need to vote on that amendment to the amendment?
I think that was my question about
Yes.
whether you're
We
incorporating
can
or
do
do we
that.
need a vote?
No, I think we'll just vote on that. So all those in favor of the A53 as amended by Chair Youakim's oral amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, the amendment
Madam-
has been amended.
Sorry, Madam Chair. And then our staff on my side, on the House side, has raised questions about paragraph A there, and
Excuse me,
it's
A.
grammatical.
Can you show me paragraph A?
So
which
we're on
page?
page 63.1 of the Senate side on R8A3, and there are, I'm told, just grammatical issues. I think this is a threshold below technical. No,
amendment? This is
no,
oral?
so,
All right,
so
let's point it out.
the question is, would you be comfortable with directing staff as they work on the amended language to simply clean up the grammatical concerns with paragraph A?
We often do that. If you want to mention those right away, we'll make sure that we have sharp pencils if you can mention those. But we always do that at the end of our bills, obviously grammatical changes
But
need
since
to be
this is,
adopted.
this is existing statute that is not being amended, if you, Ms. Para can help, I'm not the guy to catch the grammatical errors.
Yeah, couple examples would help, Ms. Pear.
Madam Chair, members, it's just things like going from singular to plural, and then both chambers strike colleges and universities in one line, but don't do it in another line. So it's those types of things.
Yes, thank you. We did mention that, and yes, we will definitely call on our nonpartisan staff to iron out those issues with, I would say, grammatical issues, perhaps.
And then, Madam Chair,
Yes.
you had raised, I believe, an issue with the effective date.
Oh, yes.
So just so we attend to that.
Yes, thank you, Chair Davnie. And what did we need to, I'll call on Ms. Butler to describe exactly where we need to insert the effective date and perhaps remove it from. Ms. Butler.
Madam Chair, members, on R9, if you go to line 64.3 of the Senate language, I would suggest you delete this section and insert paragraph C.
Say that again, Ms. Butler?
Madam Chair, members, on 64.3, delete this section and insert paragraph C.
All right. Okay. Is there any discussion on that? All those in favor of deleting this section and insert paragraph C, which would be at 64.3. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The amendment has been adopted. And now we're back on to the original motion as amended, which is adopting House Article 2, Section 8 as amended with the A3 oral, the A53 amendment as amended. And Senate Section 3, and Senate Article 3, Section 4. Any, as amended, thank you, as amended. Any further
Yes.
discussion? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Okay. Adopted. Members, the next motion is to adopt Senate Article 2, Section 5, with the A57 amendment, and House Article 3, Section 49. Just to refresh members, you all have that A57 amendment in front of you? We discussed that a bit earlier. And we had significant discussion on also adopting House Article 3, Section 49. Is there, can everybody see that language? Okay, all those, any
I think-
questions?
I think Representative Urdahl.
Representative Urdahl.
I would move, I'd like to move, sorry, the 203 amendment.
Well, let's see. We have the 857. Yes. So we just have the A57. We've moved that amendment. Does he want to amend that? So, yeah, so Representative Urdahl, I think your motion would be to amend the A57 amendment with the A203.
Okay. Just want to make sure
Yes,
the process is right here.
yes.
I will have,
And to your, to the A203, Rep. Urdahl, we didn't speak about that before our recess, so do you want to discuss that briefly?
sure. We've, as many of you know, I've been kind of crusading on civics education this year. And, you know, I have this portion of it. There are three parts to the bill. One dealing with having credit, the course for credit in civics to juniors or seniors. One dealing with civic life, and the other dealing with aggregate accounting of test scores. And this one deals with the first part, the credit alignment here. So I have tried to address every possible question that comes up with this. Sometimes I felt like it was kind of like whack-a-mole. I would get something figured out, and then something else would come up. And finally, now, there were objections to certain things about mandating and whatever. And as a born-again local controller, I decided that we would make this permissive. So all this says is that a school district is encouraged to offer a course for credit in government and citizenship to 11th or 12th graders who begin 9th grade in the 2021 school year. As Senator Nelson has said many times, if things aren't working, you have to look at ways that maybe you can make them better. You know, you've talked about moving the needle a little bit. I think this does that. I appreciate, Senator Nelson, your help on this. For over a year now that we've been working on this. Last year, it made it into the bill that was vetoed. You know, we have this provision again this year. We are basically accepting Senate language here with a brief one-word amendment, encouraged. And I have another amendment that I would like to offer, which puts in the civic life portion, which is in the House bill. So in other words, we would be trading one position. We would each be taking the position of another. And the third one, the accounting, I think would be left up to discussion between you, Madam Chair, and Chair Davnie, and I have every bit of confidence, Chair Nelson, in your very fine negotiating ability to work this out. So with that, I renew my motion here to do the A03 amendment, which deals with making your language not a mandate, but permissive regarding credits for civics.
Madam Chair?
Chair Davnie.
Madam Chair, I first want to thank Representative Urdahl for being a model of persistence when it comes to this topic. He has done that and more. I think he has made some very good arguments. I know when you accepted the amendment on the floor with the mandate, you expressed some hesitation in that acceptance. And if I recall correctly, it was the possible impact of that mandate of moving civics to 11th or 12th grade on students involved in CTE programs, students involved in PSEO programs, students who are looking to take AP or dual enrollment programs, that shifting this around and making it mandatory at 11th or 12th grade can create problems for those students. And I want to share that say that I share those concerns, and that's been part of the session-long conversation that Representative Urdahl and I have had. I also know that in my school district, there are certain high schools that really have found that teaching it at 9th grade better sets students up for later history and other social studies courses, that it lays a groundwork where they understand as emerging young adults how we make decisions in our society, and that doing that at 9th grade is positive. I'd want to leave this up for that local control thing. As a Representative Urdahl describes himself as a born-again local control person. I want to leave this up to that social studies department in that high school to make the determination. And this language does that, and I think responds to some of the concerns that you had on the Senate floor.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. First, Representative Urdahl, you need to tell us where this is in the side-by-side. So we see as the Senate author, of course, I was the Senate author, you are the House author. We want to see the exact language in the side-by-side, which my staff has found here already, which is Article 2, R15.
5.
Article 5? No. Oh, I'm sorry, can't read upside down.
R15.
Article
A2.
A2, R5. I just want to make sure that we have the language beside us. Yes.
Yes, Madam Chair?
We're looking over, so that's the Senate language. We're looking over for the House language, which is in a different spot, which is R15.
R15A2.
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Representative Urdahl.
thank you. Once again, of the three parts of the bill, you wound up with one, we wound up with one, and the third one is floating in Never Never Land. And we are asking here, essentially, that we bring two of them together.
So, Representative Urdahl, this is just a bit premature. This wasn't part of the proposal that the Senate brought, and it also does not, well, number one, I appreciate the language. I think looking at the A203 is good language. I think any time that we can not mandate our schools is the right approach. Encourage is the right approach. We worked very hard in the Senate bill to do encouragement and not mandates. So I appreciate the direction of this. The what you need to know is that this amendment is a standalone amendment. It does not construe or obligate any other provisions of the things that, for example, of what you talked about, the other issues. And so those are things that will be addressed at a later time. But the amendment before us, your A203, which has been amended onto the A57, is specifically the language in paragraph D. So it's very clear, and I don't want to have any misunderstanding that by accepting this amendment or as a friendly amendment or my support of it would anyway, in any shape, indicate additional support of any other type of language in our side-by-sides.
I understand.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear. So we just had to be very, very clear on that. So members, while we've had a lot of discussion about a number of issues and regarding the civics encouragement and other things in addition to this, I'm cautious, however, about adding a amendment that is a policy that we haven't even addressed yet here today. I guess I'm a little concerned about that.
Madam Chair.
Yeah. So, yep, I don't want to set a precedent
Madam
here,
Chair.
but Miss Chair Urdahl, Representative Urdahl.
You can call me Chair, it's okay.
See, I've called you Senator too, but we'll go with Rep for today.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
this is nothing new. I mean,
Oh, we've
this
done
has
it for
gone-
years.
It's gone through your committee. We've been talking about it for a year. If anybody doesn't know what this is, I'll keep talking and talking and talking.
Chair Davnie and I have addressed that,
I don't
quite
know that he
frankly.
needs to resort to
So how much do you want to hear from me in the next year?
No, we don't want to hear any more than we need to. But what I did want to make clear is that this is is a premature piece in that we haven't addressed there's a more full section on civics, and I'm sure that we will be addressing that at some point, and it is in both bills. And so, and the things that were kind of part of our parameters is there language in both bills? And there is. It's addressed in both bills. And the other piece was, while we are waiting for that joint budget target, we're not going to address any money issues. And so a piece that I'm very interested in did have a fiscal note, so we're going to have to hold off on that. But I would encourage members to adopt the A203. I see that as a friendly amendment to the A57. And is there any further discussion? I'm just kind of looking at Rep. Urdahl. Chair Youakim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think one of the reasons why we added the definitions of civic life in that section that Representative Urdahl was
Chair
talking
Youakim,
about.
we do not have that. We're not addressing that right now.
Oh,
I just want to keep us
I-
focused on what we have, which is
Madam Chair, I
the
understand
A203.
that. I
Chair
understand
Youakim.
that. Why I'm trying to explain is the conversation that we had that I think you might be interested in, because I know you really do care about PSEO. The conversation we had in committee was comfort language for PSEO folks when it has the definition of civics life and how that addresses if they're going to be teaching it in 11th and 12th grade as a credit. It gives them flexibility to still be able to do it as a PSEO class. So that might be something Mr. Downham could chat with you about later. That might give you a little bit of comfort, but that was comfort language for PSEO folks.
Thank you, Chair Youakim. I think that was in the bill as I originally authored that. But is there any further discussion? So what we have before us, members, we do have, I think we first need to adopt the A203 to the A57. So there's an amendment, the A203, Representative Urdahl and would like to amend the A57. We've had a long, lengthy discussion on this. Seeing no more questions, hope you're all fully informed and ready to vote. All right, all those in favor of adopting the A203 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Congratulations, Rep. Urdahl. That has been adopted. And now we have the
Madam Chair.
A57 as adopted by the 203.
Madam Chair.
Representative Urdahl.
Now, you did mention the civic life experiential learning. I am prepared to offer that as well today. Would you prefer that it be done at a later time?
Yes, I was very, very clear on that. Thank you for
I
asking.
wasn't real clear, see, so
Oh.
I just wanted to.
I can be very clear, too. All right, Representative Urdahl, hang on for a better time. Thank you very much. All right, so members, now to what we have in front of us. So I move that we adopt Senate Article 2, Section 5 with the A57 as amended, and House Article 3, Section 49. We've had a good deal of discussion. I want to make sure everyone is fully informed. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. No, same sign. The provisions have been adopted.
Madam Chair?
Chair Dapp.
I believe that that marks the 40th Senate provision that we've adopted in this conference committee.
Oh, Chair, I am so glad we are keeping track. I know we have those house numbers as well,
You know-
and we will add those. Actually,
Most of those, most, not all, we've adopted several Senate provisions standalone. Most of them were, joint,
yes.
which, such as that one, that, just a little tweak. But
So
the Senate has done some good work this year.
So, thank you, Chair Davnie. Actually, I think we have done good work. I think if we look back and look at all the things that we have been able to adopt from both of the chamber bills, I believe we've done a very good job under the constraints that we have, which is we just don't have those joint targets yet. So I do commend all the members for their patience as we work through those things that are truly within our jurisdiction right now. Thank you, Chair Davnie. We'll get you that running house number, too.
All right.
All right. So, members, the next item on your sheet was what we had marked as item 3, and that is, I would move House Article 4, Section 2, Paragraph D only, and Senate Article 4, Section 1, Paragraph B only. Might recall our discussion on that. And that looks like it's on Article 4R1, just to refresh your memories.
Madam Chair?
Chair Youakim.
Yes, I'd like to make, and I don't have it printed out, but I'd like to make an oral amendment on this.
Let's get to the language then, so we can insert that in the right spot. Chair Youakim.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and, I would be remiss if I didn't say, I feel bad that we're giving up the House provision on the short-term objectives. We had a lot of great discussion on this in committee and some very strong advocates for it, but I'd be willing to do that if you could look at, and I also do respect not wanting to take language that has money. I get that. But if you look at the language on 160.32 to 161.2, and in particular, the word "or" on 160.33, this does not cost money because it says that it requires the parent to be given time during the school day to review a student's individual education program. And just to give a little background on the discussion we had around this in committee, and I know we're not talking about the funding stuff today, but one of the reasons why we brought that forward for para training is that our paraprofessionals, especially in the area of special education, deal with a lot of intense need from students, from kids that have high ACEs scores and paras need trauma training, to crisis prevention and intervention training to keep kids and themselves safe. But also, we deal with a lot of students that are medically fragile. And by medically fragile, I mean students that have feeding tubes, students that have a variety of different accoutrements that come with them that need to be navigated with and dealt with. So you could be a para that's subbing and come in and be giving a student that has a feeding tube and needs help with toileting where the feeding tube is close to, and not have any idea because you've not been prepared to deal with that child, but it's your job. And we really need paras to have the full gamut of knowing what they're supposed to be dealing with. And it's not just medically fragile. I can explain from an experience that I had working with a student as a para, helping him with math, who I had not realized he had been abused by his father. Father was in jail for sexual abuse. And the student I was working with needed help with math. And he always wanted to count my fingers and not use the dots on the paper. I always gave him a choice. But the minute I would put my hands up even a few feet, 3-4 feet from his face, he'd get very anxiety-ridden. Sometimes he'd scream, sometimes he'd cry, and I didn't know what was going on until I finally had a chance to look at his IEP and was given time during a lunch break to look at it, to realize this student, what had happened to the student, and once I got trauma training, which was a whole nother month later, to realize I was probably re-stigmatizing this poor child every time we did math. So my point here is there is a variety of needs that our children have that we're dealing with, that it would really be beneficial for that paraprofessional to be able to just have a chance during the school day to look at that IEP. Now, ideally, a para would be trained ahead of the school year. A para would know their caseload. A para would know what kids they're dealing with and be prepared fully for that. In reality, that with our cash-strapped districts and all the issues they're having with the cross-subsidy and trying to find the money to even get through the school day, that's not going to always happen. That's why, when we start talking about money, we'll explain why it's so important to get paras some training. But just to have this language in here that requires that a para is able to look at that IEP during the school day could make a tremendous difference to so many of our students. So this is a portion of this language that does not cost anything that I would beseech you to consider adding.
Oh, thank you, Chair Youakim. And I agree with you. I mean, we thank God for our paras. They do a remarkable job, and sometimes under very difficult situations. And they make a world of difference in our classrooms. They make a world of difference with our students, with all of our students, not just the students that they might be working with, but with all of our students. So I definitely understand, and we would hope that all teachers, anyone who interacts with our children, with our students, would have what I would call that necessary background information of an IEP. But with that said, this is not just a local control issue. That would be the state of Minnesota stepping in. It's a management issue. It would be the state of Minnesota stepping in, telling schools how to manage their staff and their staff time. I think there's also another layer too. I believe all of our paras, I think we have six different six different unions that represent non-licensed teachers in our schools, one of them for paras, and we have different, I also think there's several different bargaining units as well. But the issue is, this is a locally, first it's a local control issue, but more importantly, it's a negotiated issue. It's a contract issue. It's a locally negotiated contract issue. So there's a couple things so we've had a lot of talk in this, in our conference committee about how the Senate really looks to not mandate things, looks for local control, and definitely I do not want to step into negotiated contract language. So I would be voting no on this, and I would encourage senators to hold the Senate position and oppose this particular amendment, not because the goal is wrong. It's what should happen. It's what we would like to see happen, but I don't believe that we should step into negotiated union contracts. And I don't believe we should step into telling our schools how to manage their staff.
Madam Chair, follow-up?
Oh, excuse me, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So I understand that. In fact, I'm glad you brought up the local control issue, because when I worked out this language, this was the compromise language of MSBA, and they are comfortable with the "or" to do that during the school day. And there's plenty of places in statute where we set a floor of what the bare minimum should be required in dealing with our students. And when we're talking about some of the most medically fragile and some of the most severely needy students in our schools, I think setting this basic floor of making sure a paraprofessional that has to deal with them can look at their IEP is a pretty basic floor we should be setting.
And Chair Youakim, definitely understand where you're going with that. I don't believe in stepping into those contract negotiations. And the other, remember the parameters that we're dealing with here, language in both bodies and no dollars. I think there would be dollars attached to this, but I could be wrong on that. But because anytime we ask our school staff to do something or additional time, there are dollars involved. But also, and so I could be mistaken on that, because, and I don't know, because we didn't hear it in the Minnesota Senate. So we don't have any provision, any language along this line in the Senate. So it doesn't really fit our parameters of what we have brought to the table here, of what we've been working on so far.
Madam Chair, I understand that, but we've already accepted language of yours we didn't hear in the House. So we just accepted Senate language on the dyslexia training for teachers that we did not hear in the House policy provision.
That was a House, offer, or that was an offer from the conference committee to the Senate. So we'll set that aside, but
we
you
didn't
did
hear
offer
it,
that,
yeah.
yes.
Madam Chair?
Chair Davnie.
Madam Chair, I think, I hope you'll hear the wisdom of Chair Youakim on the appropriate role of the legislature. And I think that's the one piece that she signaled appropriately, is that we set a floor. And we encourage and support our school districts to innovate above that floor. But we know from testimony in the House in the past that we have school districts that don't allow paraprofessionals to read the IEPs of the students that they're responsible for. You talked about hope. I'm reminded of my father, who said, you can wish in one hand and spit in the other and see which fills up first. Hope is good. But it doesn't get the students, which I would say our other responsibility is look out for the best interests of the students. And not allowing a paraprofessional to review the IEP of a medically fragile student, of a student with a history of trauma, of a student with who's needs special services because they're on the autism spectrum and so on, before dealing with that student, does not look out for the best interests of the student. And I believe that is our responsibility. If I were a parent of one of those students and I found out that the staff taking care of my child was not being allowed to understand how to take care of that child as the school and we as the parents had agreed to through the IEP, I would be outraged. And I would be deeply concerned. You know, I hear the voices of the parents of students with autism who say, you know, if you know one kid with autism or on the autism spectrum, you know one kid on the autism spectrum. And those labels only get you so far in understanding how to best work with that child. The IEP is really the document that needs reviewing to understand how dealing with little Carla with autism and is different than dealing with little Jim with autism. I would certainly urge that you reconsider and accept the Youakim amendment.
Chair Davnie, was there an amendment offered? I didn't recall. Did you offer an
There's an
amendment?
oral amendment,
Thank
yes.
you.
For lines 160.32 to 161.2 in the House language.
Thank you, Chair Youakim. Chair Davnie, there is nothing that is preventing, so don't read more into language that is there or don't read into. There's nothing that is preventing a paraprofessional from reading a student's IEP. What this language is doing is stepping in where our union contracts determine these type of issues and where management works with our unions to determine these kind of contracts. I'm not saying no forever. I'm saying no today.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Rep. Sandstede.
thank you very much. I was going to talk, and members, I was going to kind of share from a teacher's perspective why I think this amendment is an excellent amendment. And if you don't know, I'm a very strong union activist and supporter. This is a very important amendment, and I'm not going to speak to you as a teacher. I am going to speak to you as a parent of 2 children who have IEPs, and how critical it is for the person who is assigned to my children or somebody else's children to have a full understanding of who the student is that they're working with and how best they can serve that individual. And that comes before contracts and labor negotiations. And I can say that school districts, school officials, teachers, paras are there first and foremost to do the right by all of our students. That's why we are in this business. That is why we come to this profession. When we underfund, when we underinvest in education, we go back to the conversation that districts have to make hard choices. Unfortunately, these hard choices are born on the backs of our students far too often. This is reasonable, this is common sense. And it is really outrageous that we could sit around this table and say, we really can't talk about this today. I have a level of I'm indignant right now as a parent. And I'm offended as an educator. And I'm certainly not sitting here trying to scold you. But this is our job. And these are the real impacts. And it isn't just the medically fragile. It is thousands of students with all types of disabilities or challenges. And we have the expectation as a state to get them across the finish line to the best of their ability, to be successful, to be able to read. How do you help a student when you know nothing about them? How do you walk into a doctor's office with the expectation they're going to treat you if they haven't looked at your chart, your case? They don't even know what this is. That's a parallel to what we're looking at in the world of education. And I mean you no disrespect, but I ask for support of this amendment. This is legitimate.
Any further discussion?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Wiger.
Chair Youakim mentioned that her amendment before us had been vetted, and it was represented that the Minnesota School Boards Association agreed with it. And Madam Chair, you've expressed a part of our concern about local control, which most of us share. But we also know about the importance of best serving students, et cetera. But the representation that the school boards may be supportive would be very important to me. And if they're prepared to just state or to affirm if that statement is their position, that would help me in my vote.
Thank you, Senator Wiger. This is not the time now for this. As you recall, when we came in, we talked about those things that are in both bodies that might have different language, which is what we have done. This is, we will at some point, we would want to hear from the school boards on this particular amendment. At this point, at this point, this is, again, I believe it's a locally bargained, negotiated statement. And I firmly am concerned about stepping into those union contracts and also these management issues that we're going to start telling our schools what they need and must not do. But I do want to make it very clear, as I said earlier, that we do want our teachers, our paras, everyone that works with our students, to be able to read those IEPs. And they're not prohibited to, I think there was some discussion about that we would prohibit. There's no prohibition of reading IEPs. The language before us is specifically saying, given a certain amount of time or certain pay to do so, which is clearly a contracting issue. So this is not in our bill. It's clearly outside of the parameters of the offer that we made today. We may have other days, and there will be other offers. But today, this is clearly not part of the Senate offer that we kindly gave to the House at our 2 o'clock meeting and offered them. We discussed the proposal. We discussed what we offered for adoption. We gave the House time to go and address this with their members, which I'm so glad that they were able to do. And at this moment now, I am not prepared to support something that is clearly outside of the adoption that we brought on at 2 o'clock today.
Okay.
But there may be another time.
Okay, and Madam Chair, I appreciate that
Senator
maybe
Wiger.
procedurally in this frame, it's not set to be teed up, and in that
Correct.
context, and perhaps in good faith, rather than see this potentially voted down, if Representative Youakim would consider withdrawing the amendment with the understanding that it could very likely be before us again on an offer sheet, and it would give a chance. I really want to have some additional dialogue with School Boards Association. So I offer that to Representative Youakim, but
Madam Chair?
your points were very well made.
Madam Chair?
Chair Davnie.
I'd suggest we just set aside this provision at this time.
We can do so. We will set aside provision 3. So if you could clarify
Certainly.
so we have the proposal, the offer was Senate paragraph B and House paragraph D only. If you like, we can adopt those and not address this one at all now. Or what's your intention? What did you ask to set aside specifically?
The package that you have identified as 3, House Article 4, Section 2, and Senate Article 4, Section 1.
Right, so thank you.
And any amendments.
Yep. So, Mr. Chair, those will be set aside. We have always honored that request, and we'll do so today as well. Those have been set aside. Members, the next we have is numbers 4 on your sheet. Those would have been the last 1, 2, 3, 6th and 7th on your sheet. And so I would move, members, that we adopt Senate Article 6, Section 4, and House Article 6, Section 8. We discussed those earlier. It has to do with disposing of school computers and then also of taking the House language regarding those joint power agreements and omitting the Senate language, which included charters. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair?
Chair Davnie.
Thank you for this, and this is agreeable to the House. I think the addition of districts being able to donate to nonprofits for distribution is a fine thing. I do, I would hope, however, since those computers have been paid for by the taxpayers of Minnesota, that those nonprofits would be Minnesota-based nonprofits who would distribute those to Minnesotans, you know, keeping the taxpayers' money in the state.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very glad you brought that up because this was a Senator Newton amendment and what they are doing in his school district. Actually, though, they are donating these surplus computers to, yes, nonprofits who have an educational purpose and mission, but to Haiti. So it's not just to Minnesota. His desire was that they be able to contribute, and the Senate, we adopted that as a friendly amendment. And so those were deemed surplus computers. And again, it was a nonprofit. Let me look at the exact language here. Let me read it for you. It's a charitable organization under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code that is registered with an Attorney General's office for educational use.
You know, and Madam Chair, I can certainly appreciate the needs of Haiti. I would just remind Senator Newton that there are needs here in Minnesota, and that Minnesota taxpayers actually are the ones who paid for it. So I would hope they would consider that in their donation policy and practice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sure they will, especially after your discussion. Thank you so much. Any further discussion? All right. Members, then again, I'll renew my motion that we move Senate Article 6, Section 4, and House Article 6, Section 8. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, no. Okay. Adopted. We have one other item for adoption today, and that would be the last item on your sheet. This has to do with a special revenue account with our early learning scholarships. I would move that we adopt House Article 8, Section 10, with the A51 amendment. You might recall we had some significant discussion about this. The A51 better adopts both the House language and the Senate language to MMB's suggestions regarding this special revenue account. Any further discussion or comments? Want to make sure everyone has that's the A51. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, no. Adopted. So we are through what we've deemed those things that are in both bodies and without dollars. We're waiting, hoping that we understand that the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader of the Senate and the Governor went back into negotiations at about 3:30 today. And while we will be waiting until we hear from them. So we will be in recess until the call of the chair. Hope springs eternal.
Oh, my.
And we are hoping. I am. We could adjourn for the day, but I am still hopeful that I know they were here until 2:30 this morning. They've been negotiating off and on throughout the day. It is not my intention, however, to bring us back into committee today if we do not have some sort of movement or agreement. But Chair Davnie, you and I and our committees have done a lot of good work already. We have a lot of things that are ready to go. And so I would say to our audience today, stay tuned to your news feeds, and if there's an agreement, we'll be back in session. We will reconvene.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Chair.
One of the practices in the House is to provide a time buffer when we recess to the call of the chair, saying an hour. We'll announce the reconvening an hour before reconvening so that people have the opportunity to have an orderly life.
Mr. Chair Davnie, I think that's a very valuable idea, especially since we don't have any idea when that might be. So you can be assured you will get a notice. Now, the Senate usually has a half-hour notice, but I think we can, we'll give a 45-minute notice. There we go, bipartisan. Oh, true, true. So we will give a 45-minute notice if we reconvene, and that will be based upon some sort of agreement coming from the legislative leaders and the governor regarding budgets.
Madam Chair?
Chair, Representative Urdahl.
Is there any time by which you would not call us back tonight?
Oh, like, can you go to bed tonight? Yeah, we will know by 9. I will not call something past 9 p.m. A notification at 9, which means we hope there's some swift movement here.
And
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I know, you're trying to get out of here, and we're not trying to hold it up.
Yeah.
I assume if there is no reconvening by 9, we don't need to return to adjourn.
Absolutely. We'll just automatically adjourn. Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, so everybody's clear, 45 minutes notice. As soon as we get something, and at 10 o'clock would be the latest we would reconvene. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.